A total of 160 members of Congress have just signed a formal charge to initiate impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump, not 30, not 50. 160 elected representatives, including 23 Republicans who crossed party lines, have declared in writing that the evidence of obstruction, witness manipulation, and abuse of power now requires immediate constitutional action. And this is not a symbolic resolution or empty political theater designed to score points with the base. This is a binding legislative charge that activates mandatory committee hearings under the rules of the House and forces the leadership to respond within 72 hours. When almost a third of the Republican caucus breaks ranks to join every Democrat in the call for impeachment, you know that something absolutely catastrophic has detonated in Washington. Click the subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the videos I publish. So, what triggered this unprecedented revolt? A leaked classified intelligence assessment to the House Oversight Committee on January 28th allegedly documents a pattern of direct interference in federal processes dating back 18 months. Sources who reviewed the 47-page assessment in a secure facility describe evidence of personal phone calls to Department of Justice officials, giving them instructions to delay charges against political allies until after the 2024 elections. This is not just another controversy about executive privilege or the limits of presidential power. This is about elected officials from both parties united to declare that a sitting president systematically corrupted the machinery of justice to protect himself and his inner circle. And believe me, when respected Republican committee chairs who defended Trump in 2 previous impeachments now lead the charge for a third, they know that something huge has just exploded. Here is the full picture of what has been happening. Tensions between Trump and federal prosecutors have been rising for months, fueled by growing accusations against former administration officials, leaked witness testimony before the grand jury, and increasingly aggressive subpoena battles for White House documents. But everything exploded on January 28th when a whistleblower from the intelligence community delivered a classified assessment directly to the House Intelligence Committee, documenting what sources describe as a systematic campaign to obstruct multiple federal investigations. The assessment, dated January 15th and marked top secret with special compartmentalized access restrictions, allegedly contains transcripts of recorded telephone conversations between Trump and senior Department of Justice officials. According to 3 sources familiar with the contents of the documents, the transcripts show Trump personally ordering delays in prosecution decisions affecting 7 different criminal investigations. These were not policy discussions or routine executive consultations about the department's priorities. The conversations reportedly include explicit instructions to postpone indictment decisions, reassign prosecutors seen as hostile, and delay the delivery of documents to grand juries investigating figures aligned with Trump. One transcript allegedly captures Trump telling the Deputy Attorney General that certain charges had to wait until after November 2024, because we can't let this hit us during the campaign season. Hit the like button if this makes sense so far. This is where it gets really serious. When members of the House Intelligence Committee reviewed the assessment in a secure facility on January 29th, they immediately recognized that the evidence crossed constitutional lines that could not be ignored, even by Trump's most loyal defenders. And let's be honest for a moment, impeachment demands from 160 legislators, including members of the president's own party, are extraordinarily rare. They do not happen because of political disagreements or partisan witch hunts. They happen when Congress believes a president has fundamentally violated the oath of office in ways that threaten the constitutional order itself. Here is what several congressional sources say happened next. On January 29th, after a 6-hour emergency review session, a bipartisan working group of 47 members held a closed-door strategy meeting to discuss their constitutional obligations. The group included representatives from the Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, the Oversight Committee, and several Republican committee chairs who had never before supported impeachment. Sources told CNN that Representative Michael Turner, the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee and a constant defender of Trump, allegedly opened the meeting by stating that the evidence was so clear and so damning that remaining silent would make us accomplices to obstruction. Meanwhile, Representative Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on oversight, described the findings of the assessment as the most direct evidence of criminal obstruction by a sitting president he had encountered in 30 years of constitutional law practice. By 9 p.m. on January 29th, the working group had expanded to include 113 members of Congress who had reviewed parts of the classified assessment. By midnight, they had drafted a joint resolution, formally demanding that the House Judiciary Committee begin impeachment proceedings within 72 hours. The resolution, published on January 30th at 7 a.m., does not use the careful diplomatic language typical of congressional documents. The opening paragraph states that Trump systematically and repeatedly interfered with federal criminal investigations with the explicit purpose of protecting his political allies and shielding himself from legal liability. The second paragraph declares that these actions constitute high crimes and misdemeanors under Article 2, Section 4 of the United States Constitution and demand immediate impeachment proceedings. The final paragraph warns that inaction would establish a precedent that places the president above the law and fundamentally undermines the separation of powers essential to our constitutional republic. Leave a comment right now if you saw this coming. I read them all. Now things get absolutely explosive. When news of the leaked assessment broke on the morning of January 30th, even Trump's staunchest Republican defenders in Congress were unable to formulate a coherent defense. Representative Jim Jordan, who had dismissed the two previous impeachment efforts as partisan persecution, remained remarkably silent for 8 hours before issuing a brief statement, acknowledging that he had serious concerns about the allegations that require a thorough investigation. The bombshell moment came at 2 p.m. on January 30th, when Representative Michael Turner, flanked by 6 other Republican committee chairs, held a press conference in the Capitol Rotunda. Reporters who attended say Turner's voice trembled with visible emotion as he explained his decision to support impeachment proceedings. "I have defended this president through countless controversies because I believe the attacks against him were politically motivated," Turner began with visibly trembling hands as he gripped the podium. "I can no longer make that argument in good conscience. The evidence I reviewed yesterday in the secure facility shows a pattern of obstruction so systematic and so deliberate that it cannot be explained as a misunderstanding or political differences. When a president personally instructs Department of Justice officials to delay criminal charges until after an election with the explicit purpose of gaining a political advantage, he has crossed a constitutional line that cannot be tolerated regardless of party." That statement sent absolute shockwaves through Washington. When a Republican chair of the Intelligence Committee, who built his career defending Trump, publicly breaks with the president over national security evidence, it indicates one thing. The classified assessment contains information so devastating that political survival now depends on distancing from the misconduct rather than defending it. The narrative of a partisan witch hunt collapses completely when the president's own party leaders demand accountability based on evidence they personally reviewed under oath in a secure facility. This is not the first time a president has faced impeachment for abuse of power and obstruction. Think of Richard Nixon during Watergate, when the Saturday Night Massacre triggered a constitutional crisis. Nixon fired the special prosecutor investigating him and then saw how Republican senators who had defended him for months began to tell him privately that he had lost their support. The pressure became so intense that top Republican Party leaders went to the White House and informed Nixon that he would not survive an impeachment vote. Nixon resigned within 48 hours rather than face certain conviction. Then there was Bill Clinton during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Although Clinton did not resign, the House voted for his impeachment on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice. The key difference is that Clinton's misconduct, while inappropriate and involving false testimony, did not directly involve the corruption of federal criminal investigations for political purposes. As a result, the impeachment never gained significant bipartisan support, as most Democrats considered the charges to involve personal conduct rather than abuse of presidential power for political gains. Subscribe immediately if you haven't already. This content exists nowhere else. And let's not forget Trump's first 2 impeachments. During the Ukraine scandal, some Republicans privately expressed concern about the quid pro quo allegations, but publicly maintained unified support. The party remained united even when the evidence seemed clear to observers outside the Republican base. During the January 6th impeachment, only 10 House Republicans voted for impeachment, despite the evidence of incitement many found convincing. The pattern had been clear. Trump's control over the Republican base was so strong that challenging him politically was considered professional suicide. Now, however, it is fundamentally different. This time, 23 Republicans are publicly signing impeachment demands before formal proceedings have even begun. The pattern is unmistakable. When presidents abuse power in ways that directly threaten the integrity of federal law enforcement and criminal justice, even their own party eventually reaches a breaking point where political loyalty can no longer be sustained in the face of constitutional duty. So, what allegedly triggered this unprecedented bipartisan reaction? According to legal experts and former federal prosecutors who reviewed summaries of the leaked assessment, the documented actions violate fundamental principles of prosecutorial independence and obstruction statutes. Reportedly, the assessment contains transcripts of 11 separate telephone conversations between Trump and senior Department of Justice officials, spanning from July 2023 to January 2025. Legal analysts say these conversations show a clear pattern of corrupt intent to interfere with ongoing criminal investigations. Here's the key detail. Reportedly, the assessment includes verbatim transcripts of Trump instructing the Deputy Attorney General on August 15, 2024, to slow walk the Walker case until we get past November, because an indictment at this time would be a political disaster. Jeffrey Walker is a former chair of Trump's campaign who faced federal corruption charges related to foreign lobbying. The conversation supposedly continues with Trump stating that if the charges proceeded before the elections, he would remember who was loyal and who was not when it came time for appointments. This was not a political debate about prosecution priorities or resource allocation. It was an explicit attempt to use the timing of federal indictments as a political weapon while threatening career Department of Justice officials with retaliation. Don't go away. The most explosive part is coming next, and this is what should alarm everyone, regardless of political affiliation. This is not just about a leaked assessment or a set of recorded calls. If a president can systematically delay federal criminal prosecution based on political convenience while threatening prosecutors with professional consequences, the entire concept of equal justice under the law is meaningless. Once that precedent is established, there is no mechanism to prevent future presidents from treating the Department of Justice as a personal defense team. The institutional damage would be irreversible. This places Republicans in Congress in an extraordinarily difficult position. On one hand, they face tremendous pressure from the Trump base to maintain unwavering support and dismiss the leaked assessment as another deep state fabrication designed to undermine a president who threatens the Washington system. That pressure means attacking the whistleblower, questioning whether the transcripts are authentic, and presenting the entire situation as a coordinated attack by intelligence agencies that have opposed Trump since 2016. On the other hand, they are now forced to confront evidence that their own committee chairs reviewed under oath in a secure facility and declared undeniable. They have to explain to voters why a president who instructs Department of Justice officials to delay criminal charges for political reasons does not constitute obstruction of justice. They have to explain to law enforcement families and legal professionals why prosecutorial independence should depend on political loyalty instead of evidence and law. And they have to answer the fundamental question of whether there are limits that restrict a president's power to interfere with federal criminal investigations. And here is the difficult part. There is no coherent defense available. Either the assessment is accurate and contains real transcripts of Trump obstructing federal investigations, in which case his actions are constitutionally indefensible, or the assessment is fabricated, which would require believing that career intelligence officials fabricated evidence, that the Inspector General approved false information, and that several Republican committee chairs are lying about what they reviewed in the secure facility. That conspiracy theory requires more suspension of disbelief than most Americans are willing to accept. Legal and political analysts call this a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. Lawrence Tribe, Harvard law professor and constitutional scholar, told MSNBC that if the allegations in the assessment are accurate, they represent the clearest case of criminal obstruction by a sitting president in U.S. history. He explained that while presidents have broad authority over executive branch operations, that authority explicitly does not extend to corrupting federal criminal investigations for personal political gain. Andrew Weissman, a former federal prosecutor who served on Robert Mueller's team, added that the alleged conduct could potentially violate multiple federal obstruction statutes. Instructing Department of Justice officials to delay indictments for political purposes while threatening them with professional consequences constitutes textbook obstruction, regardless of whether it is carried out by a private citizen or the president. Do me a favor and hit that like button hard because it really helps this video reach more people. Even some conservative legal scholars who usually defend broad presidential authority have recognized the gravity of these accusations. Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington University, who testified in defense of Trump during the first impeachment, told Fox News that using the timing of prosecution as a political weapon crosses constitutional borders that should concern everyone. Turley emphasized that while reasonable people can debate the scope of executive privilege, there is no legitimate argument that presidents may corrupt criminal investigations to protect their political allies or themselves. That principle, he noted, transcends partisan differences and goes to the heart of whether we are governed by law or by individual power. So let's analyze what this could mean going forward. First, the political impact is immediate and severe. There is now a formal bipartisan impeachment demand signed by 160 members of Congress, including almost a quarter of House Republicans. Although these demands have no direct legal force, their symbolic and political weight is enormous. They signal to other Republicans that breaking ranks may be politically necessary for survival. Second, it creates catastrophic problems for Trump's relationship with law enforcement. Career prosecutors at the Department of Justice and FBI agents are watching how civilian leadership allegedly uses federal investigations as political tools. A poll by the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association found that 71% of respondents believed political interference in prosecution decisions undermines the rule of law. That is an astonishing figure for an administration that has consistently presented itself as the presidency of law and order. Finally, looking ahead, the political implications are seismic. Every Republican candidate will now face direct questions about whether they support a president who allegedly obstructed federal criminal investigations for political advantage. Campaign ads featuring former prosecutors are already in production, asking why Republican lawmakers do not demand accountability for conduct that would result in criminal charges against any ordinary citizen. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. I'm very curious to see your perspective. But beyond the immediate political consequences, this controversy is fundamentally about constitutional principles. The president's role as chief executive requires subordinating personal political interests to the rule of law. If a president can systematically delay prosecutions to protect his political allies while threatening career prosecutors with retaliation, the entire concept of equal justice collapses. This scenario is causing absolute panic within Republican leadership. Multiple reports indicate that top Republicans held emergency conference calls throughout January 30th to determine a unified response strategy. Some argued for attacking the leak itself, claiming that classified information should not have been revealed. Others insisted that the substance of the allegations demanded a response, regardless of how the information became public. The party is fracturing in real time between those who prioritize political loyalty and those who argue that constitutional duty requires addressing serious evidence. Meanwhile, Trump's most loyal supporters are absolutely furious with the 23 Republicans who signed the impeachment resolution. Social media is flooded with calls to run primary challengers against every lawmaker who broke ranks. These representatives are being branded as traitors and deep state collaborators. For the base, this represents the ultimate betrayal. Things escalated dramatically when Trump himself responded with a series of True Social posts at 11 p.m. on January 30th. He called the impeachment demand total fraud and a witch hunt orchestrated by radical Democrats and weak, sold-out Republicans who lacked the courage to fight for America. He claimed the leaked assessment was fabricated by dishonest intelligence officials who have opposed him since his first day in office. Trump specifically named 6 Republican representatives who signed the resolution, called them cowards, and promised they would pay a severe political price for their betrayal. He declared that real Republicans understand this is just another deep state operation designed to override the will of the American people. Stick with me. What comes next will completely change your view of the situation. Here is what makes Trump's response even more problematic from a legal perspective. The response essentially confirmed, rather than refuted, the core allegations. Instead of addressing the specific claims about instructing Department of Justice officials to delay charges, Trump's defense consisted entirely of attacking the messenger and questioning the motives of those exposing the evidence. When your response to serious allegations involves rage and personal attacks instead of a substantive rebuttal of the facts, you have essentially conceded the underlying argument. Legal experts recognize this pattern immediately. Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney and current law professor at the University of Michigan, pointed out on CNN that Trump's response follows a familiar playbook of deflection rather than denial. She noted that if the transcripts were fabricated or the accusations false, the natural response would be a categorical denial with specific factual corrections. Instead, Trump attacked the process and the people rather than disputing what he actually said in the recorded calls. That defensive posture, McQuaid argued, strongly suggests the substance of the allegations is accurate. This goes far beyond a single controversy or a leaked intelligence assessment. It is about whether a president can systematically corrupt federal criminal prosecution for personal political gain without facing constitutional accountability. If there are no consequences for allegedly instructing prosecutors to delay charges against political allies until after elections, a precedent is set that the presidency exists above the law. If this blows your mind, hit the like button right now. Here's where we truly are. A bipartisan coalition of 160 members of Congress has formally demanded impeachment proceedings after reviewing classified evidence of systematic obstruction. When Republican Intelligence Committee chairs who defended Trump in two previous impeachments openly break with their own party over evidence they reviewed under oath, we have entered genuinely unprecedented constitutional territory. If there are no consequences, the president becomes an autocrat. Future presidents would understand they can treat the Department of Justice as a political weapon and law enforcement as a loyalty test, without facing impeachment regardless of how flagrant the obstruction. The institutional damage to prosecutorial independence would be catastrophically irreversible. Keep a close watch on this story. House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan has 72 hours under House rules to respond to the impeachment demand and schedule hearings. More Republicans are requesting access to review the classified assessment, weighing whether to add their names to the list. And career prosecutors throughout the Department of Justice are watching whether their elected representatives will prioritize constitutional duty over political loyalty. Before you go further, hit that subscribe button hard so you never miss content like this. This is where things stand at this moment. 160 elected officials from both parties have just put their careers on the line by publicly declaring that a sitting president systematically obstructed federal criminal investigations. Career prosecutors and law enforcement officers across the country are watching closely to see if justice matters more than politics. Meanwhile, reportedly, more Republicans are reviewing the classified evidence, deciding whether their constitutional oath requires them to join the impeachment call, regardless of the political consequences. This is not just another political controversy that will fade from the news cycle in a week. This is a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. What happens next could fundamentally determine whether the presidency has meaningful limits when it comes to corrupting federal law enforcement for personal political gain. The evidence is documented in a classified intelligence assessment reviewed under oath by Republican committee chairs. The impeachment demand has been filed by 160 members of Congress, including 23 Republicans who broke with their party. Now we wait to see if constitutional accountability still carries any weight in Washington, or if political loyalty has permanently replaced the rule of law. What is at stake has never been so important. The evidence has never been more direct, and the constitutional crisis has never been more immediate. Pause for a second and hit the like button if you find value in this coverage.